Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. So excited to have you guys join us today. My name's Steven. I'll be your moderator for today's web shop. Great and excited to have you guys join us for part two of our Beyond Price and Quality web shop series and discuss project management for property professionals. So just a few notes of housekeeping that I wanted to address. In terms of audio setting, check that your audio output is working. We have limited the ability for video and audio to just myself and our two panelists, which I'll introduce momentarily. Also, don't worry about taking extensive notes today. All attendees will receive a copy of today's presentation for your reference, including a recording of today's session, along with a few other valuable key templates and takeaway items. In terms of engagement, this isn't just a webinar, it is truly a web shop. We encourage you guys to have active participation and engagement. We'll do our best to address as many questions as possible during our session and throughout this web shop, but we will have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end. Feel free to ask questions as they arise. We'll do our best to address them in real time, but anything we're unable to get to, we'll make sure we answer towards the end. Now, before we get started, I'd like to draw your attention to a fun opportunity. We're going to be awarding a $200 Amazon gift card to one random attendee from today's session that engages us in the chat box and poses either the best question or has the best story for us. So just to get things started, softball, just to see that chat box start to filter in. I'm just curious, which companies are some of you guys joining us from? And as we start to see some of those answers filter in, I wanted to mention that, again, this is a web shop. It's meant to be interactive. So please feel free to post questions as they arise. We'll do our best to address them in real time. Last piece of housekeeping before we dive in, and something to keep in mind, is that we do offer tailored lunch and learn sessions. So we've outlined a couple of great topics that are here on this slide, and we've been executing a number of these over the course of the last several months and have been getting some terrific feedback. So we'd love to bring this content or other topics of content into your office and present it to you and your team. So if you oversee continued learning at your company, please contact me directly after this session, and we'll be happy to discuss details with you. Okay, well, you're probably wondering who these other gentlemen are on the call with me that are patiently waiting to dive into this content. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dave Nate, founder and CEO, and Heinrich Schumann, managing partner of WCP Building Renewal. Between these two guys, yes, hello guys, say hello.
Hello.
So between these two guys, we have over 40 years of industry experience presenting to us today. So definitely two industry veterans bringing us their knowledge. Great to have you guys join. You'll also notice we have Lisa Garrett, our office manager. She'll be monitoring the chat box today. And of course, I am Steven, business development manager. So moving along, we get a lot of questions about our name. For instance, what does WCP stand for? Well, WCP is an acronym for our original name, Wolfgang Commercial Painters, and serves as a tribute to our 20 years in business. You might also be wondering why we've added Building Renewal to our name and what the heck Building Renewal even is. Well, that's a great question. And simply put, it encompasses the revitalization and restoration of a building's interior and exterior services, which include high and low-rise building restorations and interior common area remodels. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Now, some of you might be joining us after attending part one of our web shop and our Beyond Price and Quality series, which was how to select the right contractor. Great to have you guys back. This session today will be valuable content for you, whether you were able to attend part one or not. So if you didn't attend, no worries. But if you did, that's terrific. We hope that you've been applying some of the best practices that were shared during that session. And like I said, if you weren't able to attend, no worries. We will be presenting the content from part one again at an upcoming web shop, or we can actually discuss coming into your office and presenting this content over a lunch and learn with you and your colleagues, as I had mentioned. Okay, great. Now, before I hand things off to Dave and Heinrich, I wanted to quickly touch on the purpose of today's session, which will be to go through the 3 steps and phases of successful project management and identifying key outcomes from each stage. We'll look at how to avoid common pitfalls and identify what those are. And also, as I mentioned, we will be distributing all the tools and templates that we show you today as a takeaway for you to utilize moving forwards. Okay, well, that's enough out of me. Let's dive into the content, starting with stage one. Dave is going to walk us through the pre-production meeting. Dave, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. Certainly appreciate you making time out of your busy schedules to join us for an hour here today and discuss project management. And yes, as Stephen mentioned, between myself and Heinrich, over 40 years of project management experience, the gray hair can attest to that. Yeah, so we're going to try and share with us some of the stuff we've learned over the years that can help you manage your projects and ensure they are successful. So before we dive in, just want to mention that the tools we're going to discuss today are transferable to all construction project types, and for that matter, any project type. Maybe a project around the office, maybe a technology onboarding project, or a new system you're developing for communications. These items we're going to discuss are transferable. The other thing I want to mention is, regardless of whether or not you are specifically tasked with project management on the construction side of things in your professional life, the tools we're going to discuss you can utilize to just follow a project along to make sure sort of check boxes are being ticked as you go, to make sure you're doing the best you can to ensure that a project ends successfully on time and budget. So we're not going to be diving into complex things like Gantt charts or project charters. That's not really necessarily useful for you. These are the simple best practices that we want to share with you. Okay, so diving in, let's go on to the next slide here. You're going to see this as a theme throughout this presentation. The 1, 2, 3, we're going to talk about the timing and attendance, the key outcomes of each stage, and then support tools and templates that we've provided for you. So diving into number 1, timing and attendance. Who needs to attend the pre-production meeting? And let's just say the pre-production meeting is where you lay the groundwork for a successful project. At this stage in a project, the PO has already been issued, the contracts have been signed, and you're actually about to start production. Okay, so let's talk about when these meetings should happen and who needs to attend them. Okay, so first off, you want to schedule these meetings 2 to 4 weeks out. And the time lag there is depending on the complexity of the project. And I will say, sometimes the size of the project does not necessarily equate with the complexity. Some smaller projects, $20,000, $30,000 projects, can be quite complex in that a lot of people are involved. So really, it's the complexity of the project that determines how far in advance you're going to schedule the meeting. 2 to 4 weeks is a best practice. Who needs to be there? Well, all stakeholders. Okay. So that's the key decision makers, the contractors, obviously, any consultants that you might have involved, site contacts, and of course, the project manager, whether that's you or perhaps another person in your company or perhaps a third party. Okay. And I will just emphasize, whether or not you are tasked with being a specific project manager, this is the one meeting in the process that we're going to discuss where I highly recommend you attend. At this meeting, like I mentioned, the foundation is laid for a successful project, and we're going to go into some of the outcomes of a pre-production meeting that are really important here. And I think you'll see why it's important that you attend these meetings. Okay, so key outcomes. So take a second just to look at this. And maybe before I dive into some of the content, some of you can post in the chat what you think is the key outcome of this pre-production meeting. And just as people are populating that in there, I'll go through just a few of these items. Okay, So the first thing you'll see up there on the far left corner is scope of work. And you might be thinking, why the heck would we be reviewing scope of work at a pre-production meeting? The job's already been tendered. It's already been awarded. Contracts have been signed. We better be clear on scope of work at this stage. Well, I'm here to tell you that there will be questions on the scope of work as the job is starting. Okay. And there likely is going to be questions from all parties, including consultants. There, everybody, as the tension dials up on a job starting, attention to detail increases and questions start to come up. So you're going over a general overview of the scope of work, the specification at this pre-production meeting to gain alignment. Another key important outcome is establishing a communication strategy and what format and cadence it's going to take. So communications are key in construction on any project. Communications is how you gain alignment. Communications is how you head off any challenges throughout a project. So who is responsible for that needs to be established at that pre-production meeting. What's the format? Is there emails going out? Is there another platform being used? Is there notices being posted on the job site? Whatever it is, any and all that needs to be clarified at this meeting. Okay. And then a third one that I'll highlight here of this list is right at the bottom there, the tenant's needs. Whether this is a large commercial shopping center that you oversee or a multi-unit strata high-rise that has 200 owners in it, there is going to be specific needs of your tenants and or owners that need to be discussed and clarified. It might be hours of work. It might be business interruption items. It might be where the contractor sets up their job site. Whatever it is, there will be key needs that need to be discussed, and you want to identify those at this meeting. Okay, so the good news is we've put together a form for you, or a checklist, Steve, there we go, that you can utilize to make sure all of these outcomes from the pre-production meeting are being met. Okay, simple form that we're going to share with you that you can go through if you're attending this meeting. And like I mentioned, I highly encourage you to do so. You can go through and just make sure all of these items are being tasked. At the end of the meeting, this form is distributed to all key stakeholders. Okay, so again, everybody's on the same page. If you did not get a chance to go to the pre-production meeting, this form should be distributed by someone. At the end of this workshop, you're going to know, wow, I need to make sure these things are all done, so you can review it again and be like, oh, I see some gaps in here. We're not clarified on when the project is starting or whatever it might be. So you can still use this tool. Okay, so this is the tool, and as mentioned, you're going to get it at the end of this workshop. So one pitfall that I want to point out when it comes to pre-production meetings, and I think it's probably obvious here, but it's that the key stakeholders do not attend. And I'm just going to highlight here, likely the most challenging stakeholder to get to this meeting is the owner. Okay, let's face it, the owner has hired you to be a gatekeeper, right? They don't want to deal with this stuff. It really is helpful if you can get the owner to a pre-production meeting at the beginning of a project, because they will be the ones making decisions. So if possible, get the owner there. Okay. And I'm just going to share with you, we're lucky enough to work with some well-known property groups, global companies. And I will share with you that the most renowned companies out there, they do vitally see the importance of a pre-production meeting. So we have been the contractor on many large complex projects where there is engineers involved, where there is designated project managers, and still someone from the property group or the property management firm. And sometimes it's a very senior representative, VP of operations, VP of capital improvements, whatever it might be, attends and is very much plays a key role in this meeting. So yeah, just wanna say that this is being practiced in the field from our customers out there. Yeah, so there you go. That's pre-production, super important part of the project management process. So that wraps that up. And now, just before we move on to the next step, which I'm just going to take you through, we're just going to take a moment to have a word from our sponsor. So over to our sponsor.
Thank you, Dave. And yeah, surprise, surprise, the sponsor of today is us, WCP Building Renewal. So I had mentioned earlier that I was going to walk you guys through our core services. I think it's important for you guys to be a bit more familiar with our full suite of building renewal services. So highlighted first are exterior services as it relates to wood, concrete, metal restoration, exterior commercial painting, membrane work, sealants and caulking, waterproofing, brick repointing, and of course, inspections, which is oftentimes the first stage and when we're coming to do an assessment of some of your key assets. As it relates to interior services, drywall and texture repairs, interior commercial painting, finished carpentry, wall coverings and protection, and we also do design consultants. So full suite of building renewal services. However, just as important, it's good for you guys to note services that we do not provide. We do not do new construction, so we are not in development. We don't do disaster restoration as it relates to fire and flood. We do not do window and roofing installation. Awesome. Well, I'm starting to see the chat box heat up a little bit. One thing I wanted to note and remind everybody, we will be giving away a $200 Amazon gift card. So that is fully up for grabs for someone that engages with us in the Q&A session as questions arise or some key stories that you guys have and you're wanting to share. Please feel free to do so, and we'll try and address those in real time. But moving right along, we're going to head into stage 2, and Heinrich's going to take us through the site meetings. Heinrich, take it away.
All right. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Into the exciting stage 2 site meetings. Okay. So we have Dave's taken us through now and laid the foundation for a great project with that pre-production stage. That is what we're going to leverage as we move through into this next stage, this next crucial stage, which is all about the site meeting. So high level, what's a site meeting all about? It's about making sure that the expectations, the scope, the other project details that we're aligned on are being delivered on throughout the production process. That's what this is all about, right? So we're going to go through the tips, tools, and give you a template to make that happen. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a second. Like, do I have to do site meetings now? Is that in my job? What's happening here, right? The reality is, and David mentioned this, the pre-production meeting is absolutely the most important thing for you to be directly involved in. The site meeting, though, on more complex projects, it can often be important for all the stakeholders to be involved as well, right? But if you're not there present, that's okay, as long as you make sure that the steps we're going to discuss here are followed. So that's what we're going to get into. All right, let's dive in. Okay, so similar, approach here to what we see in the continued theme for the site meeting. We're going to start off and talk about timing and frequency. What are the best practices on that front? Then we're going to move into those key outcomes. What do you want to get accomplished through the site meeting? And finally, we're going to give you a template that you can use, adapt for your own projects. All right, let's move on to timing and frequency. Okay, so we're going to look at schedule. We're going to look at attendees. We're going to define like who actually is involved in this. So we'll start with schedule. Look, as a best practice, weekly is a great cadence of time for this. Now that could vary. It could be a little bit less often. It could be more often as well if the project requires that. The most important part there is that you're going to define that upfront. Probably at that pre-production stage, you're going to agree, how often are we doing this? And a great recommendation, schedule this on an ongoing basis. So just make sure it's 10 a.m. on a Friday, for example, and it just has that continued ongoing cadence where that happens. Who's involved? Well, no shock, it's going to be the key stakeholders. Now, hey, there may be some that aren't there in person if they're not involved in the week by week production of the project, but make sure that all the people that should be there are, right? So you can go through this process. Okay, great. So we got our schedule in line, we got our attendees. Let's move into the key outcomes.
Hey, really quick, Heinrich, just before we move on, a question was, is it okay to host these remotely? Obviously, the frequency weekly, that's, sometimes unable for all key stakeholders to be there. So in your experience, has this been done remotely via Zoom or Google Meets or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, totally. Well, hey, look at what we're doing right here, right now. Yeah, definitely. You can absolutely leverage technology. In person, I will say, is almost always best. But whether it's a remote project, and we've done lots of these with remote projects, or you just can't make it for whatever reason, being there using FaceTime or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, the tools are endless, is a great option, to again make sure that the step is hit, right? And the people are there, right? So absolutely use those tools as needed, definitely.
Right.
Okay, so we got some key outcomes that we want to get through here. And these are just the high level things that we want to make sure are addressed. And of course, we start off with scope of work and progress. So what are we doing here? We're getting a sense, high level, of where the project is at. How are we doing on that scope of work? What's the current progress right now? Where are we at? And summarizing that, so making sure that's the case seems pretty table stake, but it's really important to get on the same page. And the next point is a crucial continuation of that, which is all about the schedule and project completion dates. No one hates anything more in these projects, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, where a project delays and you hear about it and you're like, well, wait a second, where did that come from? Why is this project a month delayed now, right? What happened? This will ensure that that's proactively addressed. And if there is an issue, a delay, and there's a myriad of reasons why it could be weather issues if the project is reliant on that. It could be manpower challenges. It could be some unforeseen circumstance. It could be change orders. There's lots of things that could do that. But hey, let's make sure that that's addressed up front at these meetings and communicate it out, which we're going to get to in a moment, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And hey, if there's a tight deadline on this, let's problem solve here and now to ensure we get the project back on track. But the key here is important communication, right? So great, you've done that. Now let's talk about change orders. These can come up, right? I'll give you a great example. We had a project last year. It was a large church. We were doing a full removal replacement of the siding on the church. So cedar siding be removed, hardy siding be installed. And so a pretty comprehensive project. But of course, as we removed all the existing siding, there was some rot underneath. Not ideal, not a lot, but totally unforeseen. And so we had that dialogue with the client, said, hey, would you like to address this? Probably should. And of course, they moved forward with it after that conversation. And that was disseminated through this site meeting process, right? So make sure those are addressed, make sure there's an action plan in place for those. Great, we've addressed our change orders. Now we move on to any issues that arise. And same thing, we'd love that these projects are just, perfectly smooth, no issues, but, that's not the case. That's not the reality we live in. And so, you address those things. But the key is just to address them proactively, get an action plan. So many things this could be. It could be tenant concerns. It could be like an unforeseen circumstance that's popped up on the project. Let's address it, right? To address it proactively and come up with a plan. And this all culminates in the most important step here, which is a summary of this whole process, of everything we've talked about, and getting that sent out to all the stakeholders. So you see that continued theme, just like with the pre-production meeting here as well. We just want to make sure that that communication happens, right? So we're sending that through. Email is always the best practice. And key in there is, what are the action items? Is there a change order? Great. There needs to be pricing on that change order, right? Are there issues that popped up that need to be addressed? Fantastic. What is the solution to those? That's going to be key in these weekly updates. Okay, fantastic. So we've got our outcomes, but as always, let's talk about a tool that we could leverage as well.
Hey, Heinrich, just before we move in, we've got a really great question come through from Sandrina. And the question is, could the claim certificate process be discussed as well, or should it be? She said they're oftentimes a bit tricky to read. So just wondering if you had any comments or notes about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if these are the times, and at the pre-production process as well, these are definitely the times to address anything like that. You do not want to make sure that you're delaying on any of these kind of things. If there's something that pops up, address it now, right? Address it proactively, rather than down the line waiting and hoping that it's going to be addressed later. So absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, great question.
Okay, so great. We have a site meeting form here. So this, like before with the pre-production, this is a template that can be used through this. And look, we encourage you to adapt it, to change it, to make it your own. But it's just going to give you a bit of a guideline, some administrative details there that you can help and fill out given your project, just some specification and scope review, just giving the general steps for a project. And again, change them to the steps on yours, adapt them. And a reminder, what you're going to receive is not going to look exactly like this. It's actually going to be a template you can use and adapt, right, very easily. So Steve will speak more on that later. And then finally, just a schedule review, just some of the things we've talked about. You notice change orders on there, items to discuss, so forth. Again, use this template, adapt it, change it. The key step is that it's being leveraged. All right. And on to, as always, a mistake to avoid. So a lack of clear weekly summaries. This happens, right? And it's not ideal. You could even have these meetings, but they don't get summarized and the action items don't get addressed, right? Well, what does that lead to? It leads to misalignment. It leads to project delays. It leads to issues popping up at a later time. We want to avoid that, right? So ensure that this happens, ensure that it gets sent out, ensure somebody is tasked with doing it so it happens, and you're on your way to a great project. Okay, that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Heinrich. Yeah, tons of great stuff. Okay, before we dive into stage 3 and take us home just with the job close, which is going to be the final stage that we review today, one thing I've been mentioning is the chat box. One thing I just wanted to clarify, it is going to be the Q&A box that we're going to be interacting with. So pose those questions. If you guys are not seeing it on your screen, at the above drop down, all the way to the right, you'll see a more option. If you click on that more option, there should be a Q&A button. Feel free to leverage that Q&A, and we'll get to those as we can, much like Sandrina's awesome comment and question that she had. But okay, keeping the show on the road, moving right along. Stage 3, going to invite Dave back in. He's going to take us through the final phase, which is the job close. Dave.
Great. Okay, so yeah, another question for the group. Who here has felt the pain of a job or a project dragging on and on and on, where it just doesn't seem to get across the finish line? I gave you guys
me,
a second.
unfortunately. Yep.
Yeah. And for those of you that are answering there, I'm going to call you. I know that everybody has experienced this in the property management, project management world. It is definitely a pain point. So much so that actually the third series, the third part of our project management series is titled The Final 5%, and it focuses on getting that job closed in a timely, effective, and efficient manner. So today, the stage 3 is a bit of a preview to the deep dive we do in it, and that's going to be hosted later in the fall. Okay.
Oh, spoiler alert, Dave.
Yeah, spoiler alert. That's right. Okay, so again, we're going to talk about the timing and attendance, the key outcomes from a job close meeting, and we're going to provide an essential template that you can utilize. Okay, so rolling right into the next slide here. A note right off the bat, the job close meeting is not the final inspection or final walkthrough, right? That has already happened. That is the contractor and the consultant or whoever, an inspector, that is their job. To get the job to being substantially complete prior to the job close meeting. Okay, you're not going to spend this meeting reviewing the site, spending hours developing punch lists of deficiencies. That's already done. Okay, so keep that in mind. We're gonna talk about that a little bit. So when to schedule these meetings? At least a week to 2 weeks notice for everybody of when this meeting is going to happen. Why? Because then that increases the tension around this meeting getting done. The contractors, the consultants, designated project managers are all saying, okay, let's get ready for this job close meeting when we're going to essentially reveal the project. Okay, so at least a week, 2 weeks advance notice, sometimes longer if it's a really complex multi-phase project. Who needs to attend? Well, familiar theme here. You're trying to get this job closed. You're trying to get it done efficiently. All the stakeholders should be in attendance if possible. All the stakeholders. So, I mean, you see the list there, but decision makers, contractors, consultants, on and on and on. If you can get them all there, even better. Better chance of getting the job signed off and next steps clearly established. Okay, let's look at some of the key outcomes. Okay, so just a couple things I'm going to hit on here. You need to, at this meeting, agree that the scope of work, the specification, is substantially complete. What does that mean? That's fancy project management talk for basically 95%. Essentially, there might be a few minor deficiencies noted on this walkthrough, and then there's going to be the demobilization process confirmed and agreed on. That's really the final 5%. Okay. The last few deficiencies or touch-ups done. The last few change orders dealt with. Often when a project is nearing completion, a change order comes in because the owner or owners are like, oh, well, while the contractor's here, let's deal with this as well. Okay. If that's the case, the plan in place to get that done if it's been last minute. And then the plan in place, as I mentioned, to get all the equipment removed, everything turned over, keys, all that security items that were installed. Okay, so those are some of the key outcomes. And another one I'll just point out there, and it's listed there in the bottom right-hand corner, is you should be getting project completion documents from your contractors and consultants. There's going to be a whole litany of items within those. You need to establish and agree on when you're going to receive that, what's going to be included, and how you're going to receive it. Okay? So again, I will note, whether you are directly involved in these types of meetings or not, as a property professional, you will definitely be seeing the communications from this meeting. So you can utilize the tool that we're about to share with you here to make sure that these outcomes are being hit. And again, like I said, way back in the pre-production meeting, if you're seeing gaps, that's when you start asking questions. Okay, let's face it, you guys are likely the people herding all the cats, bringing it all together. So use these tools that we've provided for you to help you do so. Okay, let's just take a quick look at this form or checklist. We're going to be providing this for you. So yeah, job close form. It basically goes through all of the outcomes and makes sure everything's hit. There's going to be an area in there for you to capture any of those last few remaining deficiencies or make some notes that are above and beyond the stuff that we've discussed here today. Okay. So again, super simple form for you to use, template for you to use. And then the last sort of mistake that we see out there that we're going to review today, it's the early job close. So this is the bane of every contractor's existence. It's when people get excited and they call for a job close meeting before the project is substantially complete. So how do you avoid this? Well, it's monitoring those weekly communications. It's asking clarifying questions along the way. It's making sure that your contractor, consultant, everybody is confident to say, yes, let's do that job close meeting 10 days from now. Let's get it on the books. Okay. Because if you do this meeting too early, you're going to be wasting a lot of time, a lot of resources. And in fact, in some cases, everybody might show up half hour in, be like, wait, we're not ready for this. The job gets canceled. It's got to be rescheduled. So sorry, the meeting gets canceled and it needs to be rescheduled. So just be wary of that, having these meetings scheduled too early. Okay. That is it. That is the job close, the final key meeting in any project management process.
Great. Thank you, Dave. And chat box, the Q&A box is starting to heat up, which is awesome to see. Some really, really good stuff. Some things I've earmarked to make sure we get to them at our dedicated Q&A session, which is upcoming here in a moment. One that I wanted to flag, really good comment from Debbie. She had noted that, and Debbie, my apologies, we're human, but on the slide, we had noted that the final walkthrough needs to be at least 1 week in advance of the final walkthrough. I believe that was a redundancy of verbiage. Dave, maybe you wanted to walk us through, because that final walkthrough of the job close needs to happen in 1 week of advance of an additional important part of the job close. Maybe if you just want
Right,
to,
so the final walkthrough, the final inspection, yeah, that's where really the contractor and the consultant, or whoever is acting in the role of consultant, there's like the deficiency walkthrough, the contractor deals with it. That is a week or two in advance of the job close meeting. Again, the job close meeting more is like the reveal of the project, and then the final administrative tasks are identified and clearly established with who's taking care of what. So it totally depends on the size of the project. If it's a phase project, deficiency walkthroughs, final inspections probably happen in phases. I'll just share, it is definitely a best project or best practice on large projects. Perfect example is multi-unit townhouse strata complexes. Maybe they're having their siding replaced. You want to go unit by unit or groups or building by building, getting those signed off in terms of deficiencies, as opposed to waiting until the very end.
great. Awesome. Thanks for the clarification.
Great question. Yep.
Yeah, awesome question. Okay, so moving in, guys. Like I said, Q&A session is going to be coming up. I see some great ones that I'd love to get to and jump at. Before we do that, I think it's important we just do a quick review of steps 1, 2, and 3, as well as also identifying and cautioning the red flags as well. Heinrich, if you want to maybe just take us through this quick here.
Okay, let's do it. So, yeah, if you've paid attention to nothing else today, if you've been answering emails, if you've been dealing with those texts, it's time to look up, focus in. We're going to do a little lightning round here, just to do if there's nothing else you take away these steps. So let's jump in. Okay, so we see our 3 stages there. The pre-production stage, most important thing to accomplish there, get all stakeholders there. This is not easy, but it's the most important thing. Get everybody there. You on your way to getting alignment. Okay, so that's the pre-production stage, done. Moving on to the site meeting. What's the most important thing? Have it summarized and sent out to all the stakeholders. Make sure that everybody's on the same page and any actionables are there and documented. Amazing. Site meeting, done. Onto the job close. You've completed that job close meeting. Make sure that there's, same theme, a documented plan with deadlines in place to ensure that the project is completed in the aligned time frame. Okay, so amazing. You got some key takeaways there. Let's look at some mistakes to avoid along the way. Okay, that pre-production stage, you don't have the stakeholders in attendance. What's going to happen? You're not going to have everybody on the same page, right? You're going to have somebody who's misaligned, and it's going to lead to problems. It's going to lead to delays. It's going to lead to challenges. So make sure that doesn't happen. Get everybody there. Second challenge, you don't have clear weekly summaries if they happen at all. What's going to happen? Again, misalignment and challenges along the way. Ensure that that summary happens, even if you're not the one doing it. Make sure that it's happening, right? That's the key piece. And finally, on the job close phase, it happens too early. You're now in a morass of deficiencies and challenges, and everybody's frustrated. It's problematic, so make sure that it only happens once we're ready to actually do that. As Dave talked about, this is meant to be a reveal. The project is like right there. Maybe there's a couple minor things, but for all intents and purposes, the contractor, whoever's running the project, feels we're ready. It's good to go, right? This is the time, so let's avoid that as well. And look, even higher level, if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's just to make sure these steps are accomplished. And whether it's you doing it, whether it's somebody that, you designate, whether the contractor is involved in this, they just need to be accomplished. And great leadership is just ensuring that leadership exists, right? And somebody's taking the reins. So there's nothing else you take away. It's to make sure these steps happen on projects that you're involved in. And that's it.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Heinrich. Thank you, Dave. Some really insightful stuff. And thank you to everybody that's attending and some of the questions that you guys have coming through. So now's the time. We're going to take about the next 10 to 15 minutes where we're going to address as many of these questions as we can. Please feel free to continue to send them through. Any of the ones we're unable to address in real time during this session, we'll make sure that we follow up with you directly and you get the answers that you guys need. And even if a question comes up after this web shop, again, we're here to help. So first one I wanted to ask, and Heinrich, maybe I'll pitch this one to you just because this is the phase or the stage that you had spoken to. But this one's coming in from Sonia, and she mentioned that the biggest problem with weekly meetings and updates is that the owners do not understand that these have costs and are something that they try to trim. And so she asks, are there examples of times that the misalignment has been an issue, and how she can share that with her clients?
Yeah, Sonia, no, great point, question. And yes, you're right. It definitely happens. And, there's a belief by many. It's like, well, what's the issue? I mean, just do the project and make it happen. We're gonna figure it out. That's just not how it goes. And, ways we can avoid that, like we set those expectations up front at that pre-production phase that this needs to happen. Here's why it needs to happen. So those are some of the preventative things we can do, to ensure that everybody's aligned, that we need to go through this process and why it's so important. And yeah, I mean, offline, we could definitely give you some specific examples. I will say, like I've been involved in projects where, everybody understands this and these happen. We just are finishing a large casino project, actually, that had lots of different elements. And we had a specific cadence of these weekly meetings every week in person. And let me tell you, we always had things pop up, right? Always had things to address, but it just ensured the project went smoothly. Vice versa, we've been on projects. We had a larger warehouse project recently where there just wasn't clear alignment on that. We couldn't get people there, and it just led to delays. It led to misalignment. It led to issues coming up where, it's like, oh, well, we want to talk about this potential change order, or we want to address this tenant concern, and we can't do that, right? It's hard to do that via email, So yes, it's a challenge. And again, the best way to avoid it is to set those expectations up front and the reasons why. Good question.
Yeah. And I'll just chime in here with another really great example. So, recently we did what would be considered an emergency restoration or demolition, actually, of a stucco wall, because the stucco had buckled and it literally was hanging by a thread and was going to pose a danger to the tenants. So yeah, hard to justify to the owner why this needs to be taken care of immediately, right? Unless they're there seeing it in advance. Hard to justify the cost of it, all of that, unless they are actually there to see it. So what safety concerns, additional prep required, unforeseen circumstances, those are all examples of examples you can share with your owners to get them there. Yeah.
Awesome question. Really, really good stuff. Okay. So moving in, so this is kind of a two-part question, and I'll pose this to both you guys. It's an observation and a comment, but there is a question that's associated to this, and maybe I'll ask that after. But this one comes in from Sandrina, and she noted that the general contractor usually drags their feet when it comes to addressing deficiencies. And in their experience, seems like they schedule their skilled crew for their next project and then use an inexperienced crew to address their deficiencies. I'm not sure. Is that something you guys have seen, or any comments you have regard to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can chime in first on this one. I mean, it definitely happens. It's a massive frustration, and we know it. And the solution, or a solution, is just to ensure, and we talked about it, at that job close meeting, and even prior, you can set these expectations. Without that job close meeting, this is why we're setting expectations on when deficiencies are going to be complete by, and any other outstanding items, right? Everybody gets on the same page, everybody gets aligned, and then they get delivered on, So you can't control a contractor fully, right? But by making sure that happens, it's documented and in writing, you can really clearly point to that and say, this is what we agreed upon, and it's not being delivered on, So very important step, and a controllable step you can do to, do your best to make sure that we don't have those frustrations.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, go right up to the pre-production meeting. If this is a concern of yours, you can discuss it right at the pre-production meeting. How will deficiencies be established? Are you going to use the same crew to complete deficiencies? that is actually doing the project for us. That's what we want. That could be a key need of yours. Get it right in there and established before the job even starts. Once a contractor is committed, you got a much higher likelihood of that being followed through on.
Great. And the second part of this question actually comes from Simi. And this is a good note. And I think I know what you guys are going to say, but would love to hear your thoughts. So Simi noted, how do you handle a very picky owner who points to the smallest deficiencies and won't sign off? I'm sure you guys have seen this in your past.
Yeah, no, it's yes, absolutely. We've definitely experienced it. You know, everybody has different expectations. This is all about expectation setting and having a great and clear scope of work right up front. These kind of things can pop up much more readily if there's, I know you keep using this term, but misalignment, right? If a given owner doesn't understand what the scope of work is, what the preparation process is for that given scope of work, what the specific deliverables are, yeah, there could be misalignment. In their mind, this is like, no, this isn't at the standard I'm expecting, you know? And the problem is you'd be like, well, it's not about what they're expecting. It's about what the scope is and what was agreed upon. You know, so follow these steps, reiterate these steps along the way, make sure there's a great scope of work right up front, and you'll have a great chance of avoiding that from happening.
Yeah, and another great tool out there for issues like this. Often, you know, the picky owner, bless their heart, is pointing out existing deficiencies, okay, that have nothing to do with the contractor that's come in to fix or remodel or renew the building. There's a tool out there called Company Cam where everything can be documented via picture. And one of the things our crews do is they go through and they take hundreds of photos of existing issues on the job site: broken pane and glass, crack in a sidewalk, existing paint hits, bent gutters, whatever it might be. And that is one way you can get over those issues really quickly if they're documented in advance. So ask your contractors, how are you documenting existing deficiencies? And another great thing to get established in the pre-production meeting.
Excellent. Okay, great. Well, listen, I think we have time for maybe one more question. Stick around because there are going to be some key next steps that we're going to share with you guys here in a moment. So the last question we're going to take on from today is coming in from Arlette. And the question is, how long does it how long typically it takes to get a building permit? This needs to be considered as well during the preliminary meeting. So I guess more of a comment, but I'm just curious, do you guys have any additional feedback or comment on that?
Sure. So keep in mind, not all projects require permits, and it depends on the jurisdiction, like the city, township, whatever it might be. So establish that first, and then I'll just say, how long does it take? Longer than you're planning, I can tell you that much. So some of them can be turned around really quickly: sidewalk use permits, street use permits, permits for hoarding, all that. But if you're getting into building permits, it can take a lot longer. And again, it is dependent on the city or jurisdiction that you deal with. So check in advance, and that's something your contractor can help you with as well in the planning phase. But permits should be are in place prior to the pre-production meeting starting, because pre-production meeting is you are a week or two away from tools coming out and work being done. Yeah.
Awesome. Heinrich, any comments on that? Or
No, that's fantastic and absolutely the case. Just plan it ahead of time. That's key. Don't try and do this when production's starting. You're going to be in trouble.
excellent. Okay, guys. Well, listen, unbelievable to host you guys today. We've been getting a couple requests actually from part one and sending that content to you guys. So we have a recording of that web shop along with the deck and some of the templates that we went through there. But one thing I wanted to note, if you guys are open to it, we can actually come in and we can do this content live for you and your colleagues at your office. in the form of a lunch and learn. So on the slide here, some of the key topics that we could cover, which include project management for property professionals, which we covered today, tendering contracts, tendering and contractor selection, as well as the final 5% of your project. So if any of these subjects would resonate with you and your team, we'd love to have a discussion and open the door to see what that may look like. We will, again, as a reminder, thank you guys. There were some terrific questions coming through in the Q&A chat box. We will be reaching out to you guys to distribute that $200 Amazon gift card to one lucky winner. So congratulations in advance. We'll be in touch with you soon. Lastly, in terms of next steps, so I mean, really, how can you apply these content and cool tools? So we went through quite a number of tools and templates. We will be sending those to you guys as value-add resources. We'll also be sending you guys this deck so that way you can reference it and read through it again. And you know, if any questions come up after the fact, please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help, even beyond just the time that we shared together today. And lastly, it was mentioned, bit of a spoiler, but also kind of a foreshadow. We will be having our part 3 and our final segment in our Beyond Price and Quality web shop series, which is going to be circulating the final 5%, making sure that you guys are closing your projects out successfully. Well, with that, and on behalf of Dave and Heinrich, I wanted to say thank you guys so much for attending today, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys at the next web shop. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks a lot.